Welcome to your personal deep dive. Today we're looking into James Allen's The Way of Peace. You shared this wanting a clearer path to inner calm, right?
That's the idea. And our mission here is really to pull out those key insights, those sort of aha moments from Allen's work.
Yeah, things you can actually use maybe right away to feel a bit more peaceful, but without, getting buried in information.
Exactly. We're digging into Allen's main point, that real, lasting peace. It comes from, well, understanding and then moving beyond our own limited self.
And this book, The Way of Peace, it's public domain, right? Thanks to Project Gutenberg.
It is timeless wisdom, freely available. So we want to make it really accessible and actionable for you now.
Okay, great. Let's get straight to it then. Allen starts with meditation.
He does, but maybe not quite how we always picture it. For him, spiritual meditation is like the core engine for spiritual growth and knowing.
So different from just asking for things like in prayer.
Yeah, he draws a distinction there. He suggests true prayer actually has this meditative quality. It's more about a focused connection to truth itself.
Like the examples he gives.
Right. Think of Buddha meditating until he realized, I am the truth. Or Jesus focusing on that divine connection, saying, I and my Father are one.
Wow, those are deep.
They are. It shows meditation as this path to profound understanding, not just wishful thinking.
So it's less about asking, more about aligning.
Precisely. Allen's point is that real prayer involves lining up your inner world, your thoughts, your intentions with what you're seeking. If you pray for wisdom, you also have to live wisely.
That makes sense. Does he give any practical tips for starting? Because finding time.
He does. He suggests finding a specific sacred time, ideally early morning.
Ah, the classic early morning slot. Why then?
Well, he points to the natural conditions.
Yeah.
It's quiet, usually. Passions are subdued after sleep, the mind's rested. He even says just overcoming that urge to stay in bed, lethargy, is a key first step.
Huh. That definitely rings true. Some mornings that feels like the main battle.
Doesn't it? And while he mentions different types of meditation, like focusing on, say, the downsides of negativity or cultivating serenity, the main thing is the object, focusing on truth.
And the result of doing this? Consistently.
It fortifies you, strengthens you against that selfish part of yourself, and helps connect you to the deeper divine self. Leads to this really calm spiritual strength.
Okay, moving on. He talks about the two masters, self and truth. Sounds pretty fundamental.
It really is. He paints this picture of an inner conflict, a constant battle for control inside us.
Between self and truth. What does he mean by self?
He describes its weapons, basically. Passion, pride, greed, vanity, stubborn self-will, all that ego-driven stuff.
And truth. What are its tools?
Completely different. Gentleness, patience, purity, sacrifice, humility, love. Qualities that come from a deeper place.
And you have to pick one.
That's his point. He emphasizes you can't really serve both fully. He even quotes Buddha and Jesus on this, the difficulty of serving two opposing masters.
So it's a stark choice then. Ego or truth.
Exactly. You can't really try and pilot two ships going in opposite directions. Choosing truth, Allen says, means you have to sacrifice to renounce the self.
Sacrifice the self. That sounds big.
It is. But he clarifies truth isn't just like a belief system you sign up for.
Oh. What is it then?
He defines it as an inner state, an unselfish, holy, aspiring heart. That's what naturally trees peace and love for everyone.
That really shifts the perspective, doesn't it? From ideas to being. Does he help us figure out which master is running the show in our own lives?
Yes, he gives some really good self-reflection questions, like, are you constantly caught up in negative thoughts, or are you actively fighting them? Are you mostly focused on your own needs, or genuinely trying to be unselfish, chasing riches and status, or letting go of that constant striving?
Those questions kind of put you on the spot.
They do. They help you see where your inner compass is pointing. He also connects judging others to this.
How so?
Judging people based on their theology or background. That comes from self, from error, he says. Truth is unifying. It sees the inherent holiness in anyone who's sincere.
So giving up self isn't about becoming a hermit.
No, not necessarily. It's an inward process. Giving up vanity, the craving for wealth, self-indulgence, hatred, condemnation. That's what leads to gentleness, purity of heart.
Being in the world but not of it.
That's the ideal he points to, the highest perfection.
Okay, this leads into his next idea, right? The acquirement of spiritual power. And it's not about brute force, I take it.
Not at all. He contrasts seeking fleeting pleasures with building real inner strength, character building. sacrifice,
So where does real power lie, according to Alan?
in controlling and directing your inner forces, your thoughts, impulses, based on higher intelligence, higher consciousness, not just strong animal passions.
How do you develop that?
By checking those impulses, checking selfish inclinations, grounding yourself in principles. He says realizing unchanging principles brings this divine calm and joy.
He contrasts the person run by self versus the one run by principle.
Yeah. The self-driven person is always scheming, self-centered, and their work, he says, ultimately crumbles. But the person of principle, calm, dauntless, unwavering, even when things get tough.
Like his example of Jesus.
Exactly. Enduring agony rather than deserting divine love. That, for Alan, demonstrates true spiritual power.
And this power isn't just handed to you.
No, it's acquired, developed through inward illumination, by realizing spiritual principles. And not just realizing them intellectually, but through constant practice and application.
Can you give an example, like with the principle of love?
Sure. He suggests diligently meditating on divine love, applying its light to everything, your interactions, your challenges. Doing that starts to reveal your own shortcomings where you're not living in harmony.
And that naturally pushes you towards change.
It does. It leads you to strive for greater harmony. He connects this growing spiritual power to increasing dispassion, patience, equanimity.
That idea of being inwardly calm, even when life is chaotic.
Yes, maintaining that inner solitude, even in a crowd. But growing these qualities isn't easy. It means focusing your consciousness on a principle and getting back up when you fall.
Even if people criticize you.
Especially then. Relying on your own conscience, your inner light. He basically says selfishness is dissipation. It's death in a spiritual sense. But unselfishness, that's power, that's life.
And living by these principles actually changes you, makes you more like them.
That's the idea. You become beautiful and unchangeable, like the principles you embody.
Wow. Okay, let's talk about the realization of selfless love. This sounds like a really advanced stage.
It's presented that way, as a deep transformative experience.
Mm.
And Alan stresses it's not passive. It requires persistent work on the heart and mind, renewing your patience, your faith, again and again.
What about failures,
Yeah.
setbacks?
He says they're just lessons, essential parts of the journey towards realizing the highest within you. He suggests seeing your failings, your sufferings, as feedback.
Feedback? How?
They show you where your weaknesses are. They guide the inner work you need to do to get closer to the divine.
So as selfishness fades, this selfless love emerges.
Gradually, yes.
Yeah.
Marked by growing patience, calmness, the fading of anger, resentment, that kind of thing.
He makes a distinction between this and, well, regular human love, right?
He does. Divine love, he says, is impartial. It embraces everything, the whole universe. It frees you from suffering because it doesn't cling.
Whereas human loves
Are often partial, specific. We cling to people, to things. And that attachment causes suffering when the object is lost or changes.
But human love isn't bad.
No. He sees it as a necessary step. You need the capacity for deep human connection, even navigating its heartaches, to eventually realize this broader divine love.
And he connects this to Christ's love.
Yes, he sees that holy love, the love of Christ, as something that lifts us above temptation, above attachment. He uses that phrase, empty thyself and I will fill thee. Divine love can't really be known, can't fill you, until that grasping self is, well, dead, or at least quieted.
Can we experience this now, this age of gold he talks about?
He suggests we can, by consciously choosing to rise above the selfish self, moving from judgment towards forgiving love.
So letting go of condemnation is key.
Absolutely central. Selfless love lives in the heart that has stopped condemning. He argues if you truly understood the causes and suffering behind someone's actions, you couldn't really dislike them in the same way.
That requires incredible self-discipline.
Unremitting self-discipline, he calls it, overcoming that habit of condemnation, because pure spiritual knowledge and love just can't coexist with it.
And realizing this love changes everything.
It destroys condemnation, disperses evil, elevates your whole consciousness to the state of universal love, goodness, justice. He recommends training the mind, heart, and tongue.
Training the tongue, too. Watching what we say.
Yes. Thoughts, feelings, words, all pathways to this realization.
Then comes the journey back to the infinite, the ultimate destination.
Yeah, it seems so. Our return to the source. He uses that beautiful analogy, a drop of water returning to the ocean. That's us eventually returning to the infinite.
Becoming one with the infinite, what does that mean?
Perfect harmony with eternal law, which he defines as wisdom, love, and peace.
But that sounds hard to grasp. for our everyday minds.
It is. He says it's incomprehensible to the personal self, our personality, our sense of being separate, our selfishness. That's what has to be surrendered.
He talks about nature changing, but something unchanging behind it.
Right. Nature's impermanent, always in flux. But there's an enduring principle of unity informing it all. If we overcome our senses, our selfishness, we can start to perceive that universal truth.
And the path involves virtue.
Yes. Practicing self-denial, conquering those animal inclinations, actively practicing virtues, humility, meekness, forgiveness, compassion, love, growing into those divine qualities.
He says goodwill gives insight. What's that connection?
When you conquer your own personality, your ego agenda, and genuinely have goodwill towards everyone, that, he says, opens the door to divine insight, to wisdom.
What does a wise person look like then?
Gentle, patient, lowly, quick to renounce judgment, slow to anger, compassionate. All those qualities of truth we talked about earlier.
So the core message is consistently abandon self.
Abandon self, deny the personal.
Yes.
That's presented as the only way to the infinite. The world, our personality, they're like transitory illusions. Universal reality is what the spiritually awakened perceive.
One great law, one truth.
Exactly. Realizing that is entering the infinite. And it's not just an idea, it's a vital experience. It comes from that inward purification, subduing desires, calming emotions, stilling the intellect.
Love of self blocks it.
Blocks truth, blocks true bliss. Yielding the self leads to this profound simplicity, this rest in the infinite, acting not from whim, but from unchanging principles.
Which brings us to the final stage, the realization of perfect peace.
The culmination. He contrasts the turmoil we see outside in the world with this undisturbed repose at the heart of everything, the dwelling place of the eternal.
And both exist within us, the turmoil and the peace.
Yes. And true, abiding peace doesn't come from external stuff, comforts, victories. It comes from wisdom. And that wisdom is inseparable from self-renunciation.
So peace, wisdom, plus letting go of self.
That's the essence. Holiness is undying peace, achieved through self-control, guided by wisdom, and it's fully realized only when the self disappears.
He has that quote, doesn't he?
This is peace, to conquer love of self and lust of life, to tear deep-rooted passion from the heart, to still the inward strife. Powerful words.
Very. So how do we do it? How do we find this perfect peace?
Conquer yourself. That's his urging. Put all your thoughts, all your desires into obedience to that divine power within you that leads to lasting light, joy, tranquility.
It sounds like retreating inward.
He recommends withdrawing from the noise, the external distractions. Go into the heart's inmost chamber. Find the deep silence, the holy calm there. That's where the eye of truth opens.
And that inner place, that's the real self.
The real and eternal self, he calls it. The abode of peace, wisdom, immortality. Lasting peace, divine knowledge they are found within.
So the power is always there.
The power to choose abiding peace is yours. It requires yielding up whatever binds your soul.
So wrapping this up, the core message from the Way of Peace really seems to be that this journey inward, understanding and transcending the self, is the path to truth and peace.
Absolutely. It all comes back to that inner work, that choice between the narrow focus of the ego and the expansive potential of truth and love within us.
Okay, so here's something for you, listening, to reflect on. Just pause for a moment after we finish. Where do you feel that pull of self most strongly in your life right now?
Yeah, where does that ego-driven part show up? And then think about one small thing, really small, maybe that you could consciously do today, not tomorrow, today.
One small step towards that path of truth, towards aligning with something deeper than the immediate wants of the ego.
Exactly. Even a tiny shift in perspective or a small conscious action.
Consider this deep dive just a starting point, really, an invitation.
Definitely. James Allen's full text has so much depth. We really encourage you to revisit it yourself, let it soak in, see how it resonates with your own experience.
Because ultimately, this way of peace, it's not some far-off destination, it's an inward journey.
And it's accessible right now
Yeah.
to anyone willing to take that first step.